Welcome back, everybody. So I came across this masterpiece the other day from Black Lives Matter, and I just couldn't let it go by without a response, for two reasons. First, because it's, well, how to describe it really, it's propaganda obviously, but it's also obviously damage control. You'll see why as we get into it. Secondly, because for all its bullshit, it does at least give me a nice chance to pretty well sum up most of my views about this particular movement all in one place. That was rather convenient, so I guess I should at least thank Black Lives Matter for that. Now, the original video was titled Black Lives Matter Has a Message You Don't Hear, which is utter bullshit right off the top because we do hear this message. We just don't believe this message, and I'll demonstrate why as we go along, but there is a difference between hearing and buying into your bullshit. I just wanted to make that clear up front. So let's dive right in and hear what they have to say, shall we?
We have never ever called for the murder of law enforcement.
Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon! Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon!
So we just imagined that shit, I guess. Look, in the modern world, pretty much everything gets recorded. You can't deny saying it later when there's video proof. So either you're just outright lying, you don't know your own movement, or you need to educate your own supporters. Which is it?
Our movement is grounded in love.
Black Lives Matter protest in Ferguson, Missouri. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Charlotte, North Carolina. And let's not forget Dallas, Texas. Is this your idea of love? Because I'm pretty sure most people would disagree with you on that. Again, either you're lying, you don't know your own movement, or need to educate your supporters. Which is it?
Less than 1% of all officers who are involved in officer-related shootings, whether it be of people like Tamir Rice, or Freddie Gray, or Oscar Grant, or Michael Brown, or Jordan Davis, are held accountable.
Alright, hold on a second there. That was quite a bit of name dropping, and I'm sure you thought that just throwing names out there would sound so bad and evil, but I actually listened to every single name, and sorry honey, they don't support your police aren't held accountable narrative. Let's take each name one at a time and lay out the facts of each case and the resolution. Because you like to say, no justice, no peace. Well, let's just see what justice you're talking about then. Tamir Rice. Facts of the case. This happened in 2014 in Cleveland, for those who don't remember. Cleveland City Police were called because a black male was pointing a gun at random people in the park. Dispatch sent 2 officers to respond. The caller included that it was probably a minor and that the pistol was probably fake, but that information was not relayed to the officers. The officers reported that upon their arrival, Officer Lohman, or however you pronounce it, shouted to the boy to show his hands 3 times. Tamir did not and reached for the weapon in his waistband. Officer Lohman fired 2 shots. The entire incident took approximately 2 seconds. After the shooting, Officer Lohman and his partner Frank Garmbach, again, I'm terrible with pronouncing names, did not provide any first aid for the first 4 minutes following the shooting. First aid was provided after another officer and an FBI agent who was working another case close by arrived. 3 minutes later, the paramedics arrived and Tamir was transported to the hospital where he later died from his injuries. Tamir's gun was later found to be an airsoft toy that did not have the orange safety feature markings that it's supposed to have. Cleveland Police Department asked for another agency to do the investigation, and the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office investigated, turned their findings over to the prosecutor, who presented it to a grand jury. During the investigation, the Sheriff's Office consulted with 2 more outside experts on the use of force, 1 retired FBI agent and a Colorado prosecutor. Both agreed that under the circumstances, the shooting was justified. However, because Tamir's family accused them of picking these 2 experts for their pro-police bias, the case was sent to a grand jury anyway. The grand jury concluded that, given the perfect storm of human error, mistakes, and communication by all involved that day, the evidence did not indicate criminal conduct by the police. I'm quoting what they actually said. The Rice family then pursued a wrongful death lawsuit against the officers and the city, which was settled for $6 million. These are the facts of the case laid out. Now, I'm not an expert on police shootings or police rules, procedures, etc. Most of us aren't. So we're really left with just these facts and nothing else to decide for ourselves what is right or what is wrong here. The key question: was Officer Lohman justified in shooting Tamir? Placing myself in Officer Lohman's shoes, knowing what he knew at the time and what he did not, I can't conclude anything else. With the information he had, feeling that his life was in danger if he did not react is a reasonable thing to think. I also think it was completely reasonable for the Rice family to sue the city because there were too many things before and after the actual shooting that were not right. Why wasn't Officer Lohman told that it was likely a minor and a fake gun? The dispatcher knew that information. Officer Lohman should have been told that information as well. The next question I had was, why wasn't first aid administered for the first 4 minutes? Well, this one I sort of get because it was answered later in the investigation. According to the unnamed FBI agent's report, the officers looked shell-shocked when he arrived. They didn't seem to know what to do. I can understand that. You've just shot someone. What do you do now? Better training from the department is needed here, but I can't fault the officer for being human. So the case is tragic, but justice was served. It's not as though there were no repercussions for the police and the city. The police department / city paid a rather large sum of money for their errors on that day. I understand that money doesn't fix everything and this little boy is still dead. I'm not disputing that. I'm saying the narrative of people just don't care when a black kid gets killed simply isn't true. People do care, and the justice system did the best it can do to make it right. Freddie Gray's case. This case happened in 2015, and for those who don't remember, this is the man arrested in Baltimore, placed in a truck by the police, then fell into a coma and later died at the hospital. I'm not going to go through this one quite as in-depth as the Tamir case because this one is a very long case with lots of moving parts, so to speak. However, all of the officers involved were charged and 4 of the 6 went to trial. 1 ended in mistrial, 3 were acquitted, and the prosecutor dropped the charges in the other 2. Now, I'm going to give you this one because, frankly, given the facts of the case, I don't know how we could possibly conclude that the police didn't do something to Mr. Gray. What that was, I don't know, but they had to do something. No one spontaneously breaks their spine and drops into a coma. Something had to cause this. What was that? I don't know. Was it in the initial arrest? Was it in an unsecured and purposely rough ride in a truck? I don't know, but in my mind, the police definitely have some level of culpability in this one. I think, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm no expert, but based on what I've heard and read about this particular case, I'm betting that at least part of the reason these cops are not in jail is because of an incompetent prosecutor. Now, this one actually feeds into your narrative of the police aren't held accountable and all, and like I said, I'm going to give you this one, but it's not as though nobody cares either. Oscar Grant's case. This case is from 2009. Viewers can feel free to look up more information than I'm going to provide here if they want, but the case is basically this. BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit for those confused, BART officers responded to reports of a fight on the train platform. Officers detained Grant and several others. Officer Johannes Messerl, I hate pronouncing names, and another officer were restraining Grant, face down and handcuffed. Messerl then drew his gun and shot Grant once in the back. Grant was pronounced dead the next morning at the hospital. Video was captured on multiple cell phones and disseminated to the media. Alameda County prosecutors charged Ms. Searle with murder. He resigned his position and pleaded not guilty. The jury found him guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but not guilty of second-degree murder. The reason? Masurel testified that he thought he was deploying his taser, not his gun. Some witnesses seemed to support his claim, while others seemed to indicate that he knew exactly what he was doing. In any case, at closing arguments, the prosecutor asked the jury to find him guilty of second-degree murder. But the jury, by California law, could return a verdict of guilty in second degree, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, or simply acquit. During deliberations, one of the jurors asked for clarification of the law with regards to whether provocation from others could make one guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The prosecutor argued that it shouldn't be considered, while the defense attorney argued that it should. The jury returned a verdict of guilty for involuntary manslaughter, and Masurel was sentenced to 2 years. Now, in this case, most of the outrage appears to be about the sentence. And while I agree, I wasn't on the jury. I didn't hear the facts as they heard them. I didn't receive the instructions that they received. And I'm sure there's more to this story than meets the eye, because personally, I don't see how you get anything other than second-degree murder out of this, based on the facts I can find. However, here again, the legal system worked. Charged, tried, convicted, sentenced, just like it's supposed to be. Now, you can argue about the supposedly lenient sentence if you like, but at the time in California, the sentencing rules for involuntary manslaughter were 1 to 3 years. So the judge was limited by the verdict of the jury. That's not racism, that's the law. The same law applied to everyone, even if it is shitty. Michael Brown. Now, this case received an awful lot of media attention, and I'm sure everybody at the very least knows the name or remembers some of the case, but let's lay out the facts. Michael Brown, accompanied by his friend Dorian Johnson, steals several packs of cigarillos from a convenience store and shoved a clerk who tried to stop him. Officer Darren Wilson is then notified of the robbery and the description of the two suspects. Officer Wilson then spots Brown and Johnson walking down the middle of the street, noting that they fit the description given. Wilson then called for backup, then backed up his car to block them. A struggle took place when Brown reached through the window of the police SUV, and Wilson's gun fired twice, with one bullet hitting Brown's right hand. Brown and Johnson then fled, and Johnson hid behind a car. Wilson got out of the car and pursued Brown. At some point, Wilson fired his gun again while facing Brown and hit him with at least 6 shots, the last most likely being the fatal shot. Brown died at the scene. The entire incident, from Wilson spotting Brown to his death, took less than 90 seconds. The aftermath included several more cars from several agencies being called to the scene to both find and arrest Johnson and to manage the growing and quickly becoming hostile crowd. This included investigators and the county medical examiner. Here, the case becomes complicated and quite lengthy to explain, so I'm just going to sum up as best I can. The case was investigated by the police, the FBI, and the Justice Department. During the investigation, the hands-up narrative pitched by the press in the immediate aftermath was found to be false. Credible witnesses were found and testified that this was not the case. The FBI investigation was centered on whether or not Wilson had violated Brown's civil rights. They went door to door looking for witnesses, and in the end, they concluded that Wilson had not violated Brown's civil rights and closed their case. The criminal aspects of the case was presented to a grand jury later. Over 5,000 pages of testimony, given by over 60 witnesses, was presented to the grand jury over the span of 3 months, and the grand jury decided not to prosecute Officer Wilson. Following the grand jury decision, the DA released thousands of these documents to the internet for public perusal. A few days later, more witness interviews and audio recordings of police dispatchers during the incident were released. And a few days after that, a third release, including transcripts and a 2-hour video of an FBI interview with Johnson, was also released. Evidence, actual physical evidence, is detailed and shows the parts of the story I just told you are true. Indisputably true. What occurred in between Brown running away and the eventual shots that killed him are the only hazy areas left for anyone to even think of questioning, and these moments are at least partially filled in by eyewitness accounts. Considering we're only talking about a 90-second incident, there's not much time in this that isn't already accounted for. So in this particular case, I'm sorry, but Mr. Brown initiated the interaction. Mr. Brown escalated the interaction, and Mr. Brown suffered the consequences of his own actions. In this case, you may not like it, but Officer Wilson was justified. Jordan Davis's case. Now, this case isn't even about police brutality or police shooting anyone, but another citizen. So, not sure why you included it here, but let's address it anyway. For those unfamiliar with it, this case happened in 2012 in Florida. David Dunn, a 47-year-old man visiting Brevard County for a wedding, confronted Jordan Davis and his friends at a gas station. Initially, the dispute was over the volume of their music. After the verbal altercation escalated, Mr. Dunn returned to his vehicle, retrieved a handgun from his car, and proceeded to fire 10 shots into Jordan Davis's vehicle, which fatally wounded Jordan Davis. The case made headlines nationwide because not only was it a racial issue, but the defense attorney attempted to cite Florida's Stand Your Ground law, and this tactic was unsuccessful for what I think is probably pretty obvious reasons. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision on first-degree murder charges, and the judge had to declare a mistrial for that specific charge. However, Mr. Dunn was found guilty of 4 other charges, including 3 attempted second-degree murder charges, and faced up to 75 years in prison for those. A retrial on the first-degree murder charge was held in October of 2014, and Mr. Dunn was found guilty and sentenced to a mandatory life sentence with no chance of parole. Did you get the last part? Mandatory life, no parole. Justice served by the law. But yeah, no one cares, and we're all racist. Now, you haven't actually mentioned these 2 cases yet, but you will. So, for organization's sake, I'm just going to include these 2 cases here. Alton Sterling's case. This case is still open, so I can't really give a conclusion on this one, or really argue much about it, as I've only seen and heard what the rest of you have. The difference between you and me here is that you care because he's a black guy. And you've already decided, regardless of the facts. I don't care what color his skin was, and I'm trying to withhold judgment until the facts are presented. But based on what I've seen, I'd be willing to bet that officer will be in jail shortly. However, it's worth noting that Mr. Sterling wasn't totally innocent here either. The video that we all saw clearly shows him resisting and struggling with the officers. While I do not think that that was justifying their shooting of him, I'm pretty sure had he not done that, and instead followed their directions, the situation wouldn't have escalated to shots fired at all. As this case hasn't gone to trial yet, whether or not justice is served, we'll just have to wait and see. And the final case you mentioned is Philando Castile. Now, this is another one where we don't yet know all the facts. It's still under investigation, and the facts are not likely to be made public until after the conclusion of the case. Whether that's a trial or not remains to be seen. The key to this particular case is going to be what happened in the 103 seconds between the initial radio call made by the officer indicating that he was making the stop and when Diamond Reynolds began recording on her phone. So far, the only account of this time we've heard is from Miss Diamond. I gather you're predisposed to believe her because, let's face it, what she says fits your narrative. But I am not so quick to believe people regardless of their skin color. Is she lying? I don't know. Truth is, neither does anyone else at this point either. So instead of jumping to a conclusion that we want to be true, let's wait a bit and see what other information comes out. I'm sure we'll all hear about it when the investigation concludes and when or if this goes to trial. Considering that justice has been done in all of the other cases you've brought up, I'm confident it will be in this case as well. But see, that's the problem. You don't want justice. You want retribution. You want vengeance. You want to be special and have super special laws to punish the evil white people, regardless of the circumstances. White man killed black man. Those are the only facts you care about. Well, fortunately, the majority of us aren't such narrow-minded racists. If we were, you'd be in chains and slavery would still exist.
Right now, police officers are allowed to be judge, jury, and executioner.
No, they aren't. As we've already demonstrated with all of your examples, the wheels of justice may not turn as fast as you'd like them to, or return the castration and decapitation results you obviously want, but the wheels do turn, and so far in every one of these cases, justice according to the law has been done.
What we know about Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, is that they were minding their business, going about their daily lives, and their lives were cut short because of their interaction with law enforcement.
This is, well, honestly, a very great example of rhetoric that's technically true and yet still utter bullshit. Because it implies something that's not true. The clear implication here being that they lost their lives through no fault of their own, and that's simply not the case. In each of these cases, at least the settled ones anyway, still waiting on the two of these, but in all of the other cases, each of these people took a specific action that helped to escalate the matter to the use of deadly force. That's not to say that the police are completely blameless, so don't take it that way. What I'm saying is that the victims helped to escalate the matter. They aren't totally blameless here.
We expect law enforcement to solve problems that cannot be solved by billy clubs, they cannot be solved by guns, they cannot be solved by jails. We believe in a world where we keep each other safe.
Let's take a quick look at the FBI murder stats. Notice anything? Here, let me help you out. That's right. The vast majority of blacks killed are killed by blacks. Irrelevant to our discussion here, but looks like whites are mostly killed by whites too, huh? And if you go through the rest of the violent crime stats, you see slight variations in each stat, but the pattern holds true. The vast majority of violent crimes are committed by a person of the same race as the victim. So you'll pardon me for saying so, but it sure doesn't look like any of us are doing a very good job of keeping each other safe, now does it? Maybe that's why we need police after all, because we can't count on ourselves to do it. We're too busy raping, robbing, and killing each other.
Because our needs are met.
Ah, and here we go. The root of it all. We're black, you owe us everything we want or need.
Because we no longer have to struggle to be heard or fight to make ends meet.
Struggle to be heard? So you've been silent till now? We've never heard a damn thing from the black community about racism, discrimination, poverty, or how horribly unfair the entire fucking world is to you? What world do you happen to live in? Because I've been hearing this shit my entire life. And make ends meet. You do realize that's what the rest of us are trying to do too, right? I mean, you do realize the vast majority of white people are poor fuckers too, right? Yet this whole poverty thing is just such a black thing, isn't it? Get a grip, lady. Stop pretending that your skin color is an excuse. It isn't. What you're talking about here is a rich versus poor thing. The vast majority of us, white or black, are poor fuckers who have to work and scratch out a living at the bottom of the pile. It sucks, but that's how it is. You're no more disadvantaged than any other poor person. You're not special. Deal with it. Want to actually fix the problem? Quit race baiting with this kind of bullshit and focus on the real issue.
This movement has never trained anyone to kill anyone else.
Plausible deniability here, that's really all this is. You know, Hitler never actually killed anyone either, right? Besides himself, anyway. You know, Charles Manson never actually killed anyone, right? Culpability doesn't rest solely on the hands of the man who pulled the trigger. You fill their heads with endless string of nonsense and utter bullshit and then feign total innocence when they take the action you've been pushing them toward the whole time. Well, that defense didn't work for Charlie. It doesn't work for you either.
But our U.S. military does do that. Our veterans, particularly those who are Black, face an interesting contradiction. In and out of uniform, they are not afforded dignity and respect.
Okay, first, you have no idea what happens in uniform, so shut it. You've never served anyone but yourself, so you've no fucking clue what it's like to serve your country. The military is a far more respectful place than the civilian world, I can tell you that. I did wear a uniform and serve my country. I have brothers of all colors who stood beside me to do exactly the same thing, and we did more than just respect each other. We stand up for each other. We look out for each other. We cover each other's asses when need be. We'll take a bullet for each other. You have no fucking idea what that sort of family bond is like, so you can just stuff that little talking point right up your ass. And out of uniform, yeah, no respect is a thing. From shits like you, who know absolutely nothing about self-sacrifice. So stop trying to appropriate veterans issues to push your stupid crap. In short, a nice hearty fuck you.
I'm not sure that there's anybody who knows more deeply the pain of losing a family member, a loved one, a brother, a sister, an uncle, an aunt, than Black people in this country right now.
Horse shit! You may know loss, but how dare you minimize anyone else's loss just so you can make your own seem super special because you're Black. One more time, fuck you.
What Black Lives Matter means is not that everybody's life doesn't matter. We're not just concerned about police violence. It's a lack of access to being able to feed your family, to have a roof over your head, to have a school where every student has books. It means that in order for us to live in a society where all lives are valued equally.
Nice cover and all, but we can all see through this charade, you know. If this were actually true, then you wouldn't be making this a race thing, would you? I mean, let's take a look at the stats. More white people are killed by cops than blacks. The only way you can say it's a black thing is to go to percentages and manipulate the raw data. By doing so, you get your convenient blacks are 2.5 times more likely number. Well, if all lives matter, then why would we need to do that? If all lives matter, then shouldn't we just focus on the approximately 990 people killed by police last year? Why have you decided that the skin color of less than half of these is the important thing? See, you care about the 258 number. I care about the 990 number. Now, unfortunately, that's just a number. It doesn't mean much because there's no context. Why were these 990 people shot by police? Were all of them justified? Were all of them unjustified? I don't know. Sadly, it seems no one does. No one keeps the stats on that. And while we're on the subject, if all lives matter equally, then why are you and your folks wandering around bitching that hashtag all lives matter is racist because it doesn't specifically focus on you? All lives matter equally, but black lives are more equal? Yeah, that's what I thought. All lives matter equally my ass. Nice try, though.
We have to pay attention to the fact that Black lives do not matter.
Well, as we've already demonstrated, that sentiment is based on nothing more than utter bullshit. It simply isn't true. Maybe you should stop telling black people that. And then they'll stop thinking that their lives don't matter. Maybe, and I know I'm going off the rails on the crazy train here. Couldn't resist. But maybe you should try lifting black people up instead of trying to tear white people down. Just a thought, but it worked pretty well for Martin Luther King.
And take action to correct that discrepancy. Some of us are registering voters. Some of us are trying to get local candidates elected to office. Some of us are trying to unelect prosecutors who throw our people behind bars for trivial reasons or no reason at all.
Exactly what are these supposedly trivial reasons? Murder, rape, robbery, battery, drug trafficking, or use? I mean, you might have some sway with me on the drug thing, but I'm going to have to shut you right the fuck down if you even think of suggesting that we shouldn't lock people up for the other ones. Even with the drug thing, I may not agree, but it is illegal. Breaking the law does have consequences, like it or not. If you don't like people going to jail for drug use, then instead of dividing the country along racial lines and screaming racism about everything, your time might be better served joining the growing movement of people trying to get the drug laws changed or thrown out altogether. But for the rest, I don't give a fuck what color your skin is. Do these things and your ass should be in jail. Don't want to go to jail? Then don't do this shit. Simple. And by the way, don't think I didn't notice the subtle emphasis on our people. Your racism's showing through despite your best efforts to keep it under control for this propaganda piece. Go ahead and try to define our people without splitting us along racial lines again. Go ahead. I bet you can't. See, that's the difference between you and me. To me, our people means all Americans. I don't give a fuck what color their skin is. If you're an American, you're one of my people. Try adopting that philosophy and see how quickly this racism shit disappears. No offense to any foreign viewers, but my fellow Americans come first. We need to fix ourselves before we can help fix the rest of the world.
If we're serious about change, we have to use every single tool in our toolbox. This train is moving. You can either get on or get off, but we're moving towards freedom, whether you like it or not.
And if this had anything to do with freedom or equality, I'd support it. But it doesn't. Black Lives Matter is a racist hate group. Everyone knows it. Stop lying and at least own your shit. Look, the Black Panthers are a militant racist hate group. You don't see them wandering the streets and telling everyone it's about peace, love, and equality, do you? I mean, I may not agree with them, but at least they own their shit. If that's the kind of group you want to be, then just admit it and stop trying to blow sunshine up our asses. We're not buying it anyway. Well, there you have it. That's the message from BLM that apparently we haven't heard. It's funny, really, because this message sounds like any other message I've heard from them, but, you know, whatever. I guess maybe there was a tiny little something in there somewhere that I hadn't heard specifically from them. I hope I've at least made myself clear about my opinions on this topic, but just to sum it all up in one quick sentiment, I don't care about skin color. Whether you're white, black, brown, or, I don't know, bright yellow with green fucking hair, I don't give a shit. I judge people by who they are, not what they are. Hopefully someday the rest of the world will do that too, and we can spend our time trying to fix real issues instead of petty bullshit. Link to the original video and sources are in the description. See you all next time.